Kings and Queens, today we're going to be recapping 3 of the most important games played at the US Chess Championships, which feature some, very advanced strategic concepts, and I want to explain how, even Grandmasters, they made some crazy blunders, in my opinion, and today we're going to take a look at them and see what we can learn from those mistakes. So, let's get right into it. And the first game I wanted to take a look at, which featured a very instructive mistake, was Dariusz Swiercz versus Fabiano Caruana. And now this game opens up with e4, we get c6, d4, d5, e5. The advanced variation of the Caruana, we get the main line, bishop f5, knight f3, e6, and bishop e2. Now, as some of you will know, I have myself employed this too. We get knight e7, c3, again, a very nice move, which I have also employed. h6, yeah, intending bishop h7 and knight g6 could be an idea. That was played mostly by Jobava, a strong Georgian grandmaster, if I'm correct. And after castles, knight d7, we get knight d2. And basically I want to speed up through this. I could also give, a very detailed analysis, but I think for this video it's quite important to have a look at these sort of key moments, because that's what it's about. It's about feeling the critical moments in the position. Now, first of all, here, bishop d3, quite a nice move. He trades more or less his best piece. But in doing so, he also removes black's very strong bishop. Yeah, and gains some more space for his pieces. Yeah, maybe, these squares are quite important, and otherwise he would get kind of cramped. Yeah, with these pieces, like the queen wants to go to e2 and it kind of can't, and yeah, it becomes pretty hard. So bishop d3, nice move. And essentially we get this move h3 and triple O. So Fabiano goes for a very uncompromising setup, because if he were to short castle, by the way, well, now this king is very weak. With knight h5 we can see 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers against, only one minor piece defending and a couple of pawns. It's very risky. You could see something like that happening. So, triple O, very nice move. And here already a slight mistake, but nothing major. He plays rook ab1. And, it's much more natural to just play rook eb1 and then to push both the pawns, in my opinion. So, the engine calls them about the same, but, yeah. This rook really belongs on this file, I think, but this is more up for debate, if we're being honest. So we get king b8, and now we get b4, of course a great move, c4, queen c2, b5, very ambitious, immediately threatening knight b6 to take control of the a4 square. So let's say you get some null move. Now we get knight b6, and immediately a4 becomes disabled. So we get a4, naturally, and now we get king b7, and here, this is the critical moment. This is what I've been building up to. So if you've lost your patience, this is great. Think here, what should you play with white and why? Alright, now first I'm gonna show you the move the white player played in the game, and then we're gonna have a look at this critical moment and see exactly what should have been played. So he played a5, and as you can see, this is a question mark move. And now, that is simply because he, has an open a file, potentially. Let's say he takes and plays rook a1. Very natural. He gets the open a file, and he can combine play on both flanks. Because in the game, now we're going to look at the continuation of the game. He played that move a5, like I said, and now we get rook g8. And essentially, I think the white player must have been thinking that he could keep the king side closed and then slowly push f4, f5, but really it doesn't make too much sense, because the king is on g1 and this king is safe. And essentially black has a lot of space to maneuver. So we get rook g8, queen d1, and yeah, slowly but surely Fabiano's now gonna come with g5, h5, and so on. And of course the reason he doesn't play g5 immediately is because then Dariusz actually gets what he wants by blocking these pawns. So first g6, intending h5, and then queen f3, which is apparently a mistake. Engine wants that move f4, but yeah, maybe a little bit awkward with these pieces. They're just very weird. This bishop is maybe the saddest thing I've ever seen, and just a very difficult position to handle for white. So he plays queen f3, And now rook h7, yeah, just guarding f7. Yeah, brings back the queen, because white has no longer any plan. Yeah, you see, when he had that a file, he could always, you know, just take and kind of come over. but in this position, he can only play on the king side. But all of black's pieces are on the king side. You can see 2 rooks, a bishop, a queen, this knight, and the white player doesn't have the rook on b1. And also the king is on g1. So yeah, it's just a very risky strategy. And now you can see he plays f4, and now it's a mistake, apparently, because g5. And there it is. You can see he spinned himself. He spinned himself down, essentially. And now taking is gonna happen. And this knight on g3 is going to feel very awkward. And so we get fg. Because, yeah, what other choice did he have? And now you can see that, yeah, Fabiano's gotten what he wanted. Gotten an open g file. Yeah, straight towards that king on g1. And this rook is inactive. And this knight is kind of stupid. And now slowly but surely, he kind of maneuvers in such a methodical way, and the white player makes another mistake, and this time it was fatal. So essentially in this position, you know, you should try to bring the rook, like I said, because this was the only piece that wasn't participating. And, you know, now still knight f8, knight g6, black is much better. I mean, the engine calls it, you know, it kind of fluctuates between 0-3 for black and 0-0, but in my opinion, black is much better here for how much that's worth, because again, he has a very simple plan of, you know, playing on the king side and maybe maneuvering his knight, pushing h4, and just, you know, making sure there's all these weaknesses on the white side of the board, and the king is weak, and this king is safe. Yeah, c3 is weak, and the only weakness black has is this f7 pawn, and then this chain is kind of weak. So, okay, doesn't play rook b2, plays h4. Why is this a mistake? Well, that's very simple. He, first of all, gives equity up for this square, so now a knight could somehow get there. After which this pawn will become very weak. You know, after putting the pawn on h4, this is a target for the rest of the game. So now let's see how Fabiano absolutely masterfully outplays this guy. So we get queen h6, rook e3, knight f5. Yeah, now you can see the side effect. Immediately this pawn on h4 is attacked. And yeah, okay, he guards it, of course. And now just another such a nice move. Just knight f8. No, there's no rush. You know, the engine is even suggesting moves like king b8. But okay, let's keep it serious. You know, knight f8. And then just playing knight g6, you know, trading the absolute best piece on the board that white has, which is the knight on f4, which controls, you know, a lot of these key squares and attacks this pawn. So he trades that piece, knight f3, and essentially just loses immediately because he can take. And, you know, you may say, well, the material is equal. How come this immediately wins? The point is that this king is so weak. And now after the move queen f4 played, and he's threatening queen g4 check, for example, and like there's just so many sort of threats in this position, it's kind of unfathomable. But first of all, I also want to say, by pushing these pawns, strategically he has a weakness, which is the c3 pawn. And that is also just a very big problem with this position. So yeah, let's see how Fabiano actually manages to put, you know, the nail in the coffin, as they say. Rook e2, queen g4, could be done. Yeah, doesn't do it, he plays king c7. Yeah, I mixed it up. I'm not even gonna lie, I mixed it up. We get rook e1, and now, you know, king d7, yeah, very methodical, just brings around the king first before instigating, and now he plays queen g4, so, okay, there's that. But still, there's no sort of clear win, you may think, so what's going on? King e7, and now, I mean, here he has a couple of wins, but I do think it's very funny how Fabiano sort of brought his king all the way, and now also gets the option to play f6. But yeah, in my opinion, the cleanest is just to take here, and then get 2 connected pawns, but I also get why Fabiano didn't want to do this, because obviously if somehow the white player is able to block them, it could get kind of tricky and there's no reason to do it. So he simply checks, and now he immediately loses the game, because, for example, here, yeah, I mean, f6 is actually a pretty good move, but yeah, there's also this queen c1 option, simply checking, and then after king g2, knight e3 comes with check, and then he's kind of forced to take here, and then you get rook knight versus queen situation, and this c3 pawn is so weak, and you cannot hold this. But okay, Fabiano does it even more methodically, just plays f6, because this rook has nowhere to go. And, you know, in a short order, he does pick up the exchange, and of course, there's no saving this position with white, and after a few more moves, eventually Caruana picks up the win. So what happened in this game is, you know, when we come back here to king b7, this is such a critical moment. Let's explore the options. And now that we have seen that a5 is, in my opinion, yeah, a losing move. Yeah, it's only minus 0.5, but practically this is crazy. So the first option is to play knight h5, g6, and then knight g3. I know, of course, there could be some h4, h5, maybe trying to get the pawn to g5 and then instigating like that, but I think the main recommendation is much more clear, which is just rook a1. Putting a rook on an open file and simply preparing to instigate. So first of all, I want to have a look at rook a8, then simply takes, and now very instructive is that when rook takes a8 happens, which is maybe the most logical move, then queen to h7, attacking these pawns on the king side. And that's what I meant at the very start when I said you have to combine play on both flanks. This is what I meant, queen h7. Yeah, so in fact, king takes a8 is forced, and then after rook a1 check, you know, king b7, you have the open file, and now things are starting to make a bit more sense when, for example, knight f6, a dynamic sacrifice could happen, but yeah, also knight f4, h4, h5 could happen. Maybe g5 now comes with tempo, so maybe slightly inaccurate. I guess knight g3, and now it does make a lot more sense to just play h4. You know, so for example, let's say this, just ignore that this pawn is that it could get captured. Let's say h5, now you get equity on this square, so you could trade this piece and the f7 pawn becomes weak. So for example, now you can see this backwards pawn, and then white could consider rook lifting. Now, personally, what I believe is the reason why he played a5 right here, the oh so bad move, is because I think he was afraid of knight b6. And why is that? Well, after takes, let's say you make a null move, and now knight a4 could come in the future, and essentially he can kind of put a block on the queen side. And now, first of all, I just want to give a couple of thoughts on this. First, if we think about the position, this knight on a4 is actually not as good as it seems. First of all, you can try to sack the rook long term, and then get a passed pawn, but also, now if we have a look on the king side, there's one piece that's missing, and it's this knight on a4. So now the tables have turned. Instead of white not having the extra piece on the king side, it's black. Yeah, so now queen d1 is a good move, and now we can start instigating on these pawns, you know, with such moves. Yeah, h4, h5, who knows? And this knight on a4 is out of the game. So that's quite interesting. So I think this is really the critical moment from this game. He should not have played a5. On that note, we conclude the analysis of this first game, and let's have a look at the second mistake. Alright, so the second game I want to have a look at is Wesley So versus Sam Shankland. And again we see a Caro-Kann defense, but here after bishop f5 we get the move h4, intending to trap the bishop. You know, so the most natural move would be e6, but then g4 comes, and this bishops get trapped. So that is exactly why that move h5 is played here, to make a luft for that bishop. Okay? We get c4, an interesting option, and yeah. Now we get this pawn structure where there's this d5 square, but white has more space. Now in this position, g3 appears to be quite an unpopular move, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not too well versed in this specific variation of the Caro-Kann, so I don't want to go too deep into the nuances of this position, because I think you guys should, you know, watch someone else explain that. But what I can explain is what's about to come. So we get knight h6, bishop f4, queen b6, castles, long castles, and now a3. And in this position, this is where the structure is defined, yeah, because we get long castles. Now the play in the position is very clear for both sides. We can see Wesley wants to push b4, b5, and then what does black want to do? And this is actually what Sam probably misunderstood, because he is supposed to play on the king side, because this pawn is on h5, so he can try to checkmate. And what happened in this game? Well, actually first think about this position, what should black play, and then again we're gonna do the thing where we, you know, afterwards can come back and analyze this position. So in the game, king b8 was played, and this move is very slow. We get b4, and now king a8, another very slow move, and now b5, and Wesley So immediately arrives. He just starts knocking on the door, and you can see these pawns are still fixed. There is no g5. And now this game becomes very one-sided. So, you know, Wesley just very methodically first creates this weakness on c6, and then controls the entire board with these two pieces, yeah, just preventing any g5 from ever happening, and he is able to instigate, and just slowly but surely he is sort of pushing, and now knight b6 is apparently a mistake, and then bishop g5 comes, like I said earlier. Now this e6 pawn is a weakness, so he attacks that weakness, and you can just see how beautiful white's pieces are and how poor black's pieces are, and now it's only a matter of time before Wesley So clears up the game. So we get e5 and slowly gains the bishop pair, and now this is just not savable. It's completely lost. Brilliant move, knight takes d4, because of course if he takes on c6, and yeah, rook b7, you know, there's a couple of options here. But yeah, let's say takes. He sort of has to take. And a6 is winning. So essentially, yeah, what I was saying, knight takes d4, brilliant move. Knight c3, bishop e3, and still Wesley has to be very accurate here, but he is. And Black's position kind of collapses. I know I'm going through this very quickly, but yeah, he has no more checks, and now he loses. The most important part was that move, king to b8. Here. Why? And now I'm gonna explain exactly what Black should have played in this position. He should have played rook g8, because now with b4, ladies and gentlemen, he goes g5, and he immediately says, hold up, you're not gonna attack me, I'm gonna attack you. And now after takes, you know, you can get takes, and this white king is very nervous and probably sweating. So here, of course, Wesley So would have played... Well, I mean, there's a couple of options, but I think, personally, he would have played queen c1, simply preventing this. It's very much in line with Wesley So, his methodical sort of gameplay. And then here, after a move like queen d8, yeah, again, intending that move. There's two options. First of all, d5. Dynamic option. Yeah, immediately going for the king, and then g5, and, you know, only the Lord knows what's gonna happen in this position. And also that move bishop g5, simply preventing g5. And then this is how play could have continued. And then here again f6, and yeah, it's just dynamically balanced. Because now Black immediately starts asking questions to White. But in this game, when you see that king b8 happens, it doesn't really improve Black's position. Of course the king is more safe on a8. Of course, but he doesn't make any progress towards his own counterplay. And so he simply plays reactive chess here. And that is simply not gonna suffice. And especially not against a player, you know, of Wesley So's caliber. So yeah, like I said, this weakness, it just kind of cost him the game. So essentially here, rook g8 seems like the turning point of the game. And on that note, I think we should look at the third game. And now lastly, I want to talk about the game Sam Sevian with the white pieces against Andy Woodward with the black pieces. And now this game opens up with c4, we got e5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, and I'm just gonna fast forward to this moment. We get b3, pretty unconventional, yeah, more typical is either knight c3, followed by a3, b4, which was very popular a couple years ago, and also, yeah, just a standard d3 move. But okay, we get b3, you know, nice move, and yeah, he maneuvers his pieces very nicely, Sam Shankland. Black makes a sort of a mistake by allowing this to happen, in my opinion, because yeah, now you can see the position can get defined in a couple of words. So you can see that here in this position, white player has 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns on the king side, and black only has 3. We can all see that. What does this mean? That means that if you can, for example, trade this e-pawn for the f-pawn, this bishop is going to be very strong, and this king is going to be very weak, because it misses one of the key defenders. Yeah, one of the 3 pawns defending the king. The queenside majority of black is essentially not as strong, because of course when you can trade, for example, a for a pawn, this b3 pawn becomes weak for sure. That's right, you're completely true, but the king is on g1, yeah, and this king is on g8, so that kind of explains it. And now let's have a look at this game, and actually a very instructive, just the most instructive blunder of this entire video so far is gonna happen, I think. Here in this position, a white plays a4, and you may think this move is innocent. This is an innocent move. Yeah, the engine still says 0-7. So why am I saying this is the biggest blunder? I mean, am I crazy? We're gonna see this very soon. a5 is played, and now this b3 pawn is very weak. And this is a complete misunderstanding in how you should play this position, in my opinion, because he's instigating on the queen side, where black is stronger, and he's creating a weakness, yeah, for black to target, while he should just play on the king side. So the best move here is simply, you know, either rook e1 or rook d1. And you should try to use these pawns. You should try to immediately just bash through the opponent. And here I gave a couple of moves, I think. Or no, that's actually immediately after this. But for example, rook d8, rook d2, queen e7, you know, just simply stepping out of the spin. h3, bishop has to go. And knight d4 is gonna come. This square is weak. Now, maybe he doesn't move the queen, you might say that. c6. Well, then e5 is gonna come, and now the spin can be utilized. And just like that, because he has a pawn majority, it's just this beautiful pawn on e4. It doesn't really matter what black does. White is always going to have some type of trick. He's always going to be able to just push through because he is just stronger on this side of the board. And this bishop is beautiful, and this knight on b6 is completely restricted. Yeah, even the d5 square is being taken away from that poor thing. So when he plays a4, we get a5. He plays again rook e1. Again, a fine move, but it doesn't have as much sort of punch as it could have had. And then here in this position he plays the move rook d1. I think he should just get rid of this bishop immediately, and that is simply because this is just a very annoying strong piece. And yeah, I mean, let's say you get something like this. Now here, this endgame, black has sort of gotten what he wanted, because he has, you know, limited this bishop, and the kingside majority isn't as good anymore when the queen is getting traded, essentially. So here after queen c6, it's not rook c1 that's the move, it's rook e3, because then he can sort of swing over like this. So let's say takes. Now, of course, white is winning because c7 is hanging. And yeah, after a move like queen b2, you know, I mean, I guess this pawn on e4 is still hanging, so maybe rook e1 first, and then queen b2. Eventually these pieces will get traded, and it'll kind of look something like this. And then you can see, you know, knight e4 is gonna come, and these light squares are all very weak. f4, e5 could come, and yeah, I just think this is just a very good position for white. And after rook d1, he sort of gives him equity with this bishop taking away some squares. It's still better for white, but yeah, bishop c3 would have been better. Queen e7, h3, fine move. Excuse me, bishop h5, and yeah, okay, this is all pretty good play by white. But now you can see bishop f7 attacking b3, and essentially he has played away 0.7 of his advantage according to the machine. And you shouldn't always look at the engine evaluation and give judgment about a position like that, but I think in this case it makes perfect sense why most of his advantage is gone. It's just because he's created weaknesses, and he has allowed black to sort of get back into the game. And even this poor knight, this poor knight, can now also join the game, maybe via c5, attacking that b3 pawn. So okay, rook d8. And now this is the most, or not the most critical moment, but also a pretty important moment. We get queen e2, and now he sort of loses the thread of the game. g6 after queen e2, g6, prevents knight f5, and now what is white's plan? It's very hard to say. So queen e2 makes little sense to me, and I think in this position, white should try to strike. He should try to go for the king, because he's created a strategical weakness on b3. So he should play g5. Or he should play h4, or maybe knight f5. And all these moves are designed to get an immediate imbalance. So first let's look at the game, and then we can come back and have a look at this position. So queen e2. Why is this so bad? Because I did go through this a little bit quickly. First of all, queen e8 is played in the game. But after g6, knight f5 is prevented. And I get why Andy didn't want to play this, by the way. Because, of course, this f6 pawn looks a bit suspicious. That's true. But at the same time, it's just a very nice prophylactic move against knight f5, you know? So, and then knight e7, knight e5 could come, but okay, he plays queen e8. Also a pretty good move. Yeah, now we get queen e3 and now queen e5. A very nice move again. And here, the best move is queen e2. And that already completely shows why what Sam Sevian is doing is wrong. Is when you are forced to play something like queen e3, queen e2, of course it's not good. And in the game he plays this move f4, and here I would pause the video and try to find the win for black. And it may seem very obvious at first, but actually it's a pretty sort of long variation. But definitely, you know, even a 2100 player could easily spot this, in my opinion. It is that move, knight d5, simply attacking the queen and the pawn, and if he takes, the queen is lost. So he moves that queen away, and now knight takes f4. And then here, the white player was pinning his hopes on knight c6, attacking both the queen and the rook. But here, Andy Woodward found a brilliant move. So he takes, and then queen takes e4. Oh, very nice, of course. Because if he takes, then simply takes, and now the queen is again hanging. So he lures the bishop away from the defense of this pawn, and then he could take this, and in the end, that does win for black. So simply he plays knight takes b4, knight takes g2, and black is up a lot of pawns and will easily win this game. So yeah, let's just have a look, and he wins. Okay, f4 is obviously the blunder that lost him the game, but he chose the wrong plan, and that is actually what this video is about. It's all about the players choosing the wrong plan and misunderstanding the very sort of concepts of this position. Now here, my opinion, h4 is the best move, because then you can try to play h5, and then g6 is impossible. And you can also try to play h6 and soften up these pieces and also get an outpost on f5. Now, some of you may suggest the move knight f5, which is also a good move, but here after queen c5, you would have to be ready to play queen b1, which is just a very nice trick, because here after bishop takes b3, you have rook c1, attacking the queen, and somehow it has no squares. And actually after bishop c4, bishop f1, that loses a piece. Yeah, so after queen b1, bishop c3 is probably a pretty good move. It kind of wants to shuffle back and forth, because of course it wants to trade that piece. Yeah, for example, now this pawn on b3 is feeling a little bit soft, and it's not as good as it was before, because now black has coordinated his pieces a lot better than in these previous examples. So essentially after bishop a3, bishop b4, you know, this move rook c1 could be played and the game goes on. Yeah, just a very complex position. Here g5 is the other option, and then after queen c5 you should take, and then after takes, knight f5 could be done. Maybe not here because b3 is hanging, of course, so rook d3. And then here a couple of ideas. Yeah, I highlighted a bit too much. Sorry about that. I think rook g3. Yeah, forcing the king to go in the corner, then knight f5, attacking this. Black's position is very compact after a move like rook d6, simply guarding f6. But it is a position with chances for both sides, at least. Yeah, because, of course, this king is also a bit soft. But yeah, I think I would prefer black here. And that is why I prefer the move h4, because then after queen c5, you know, you can simply play queen e2, because this knight is just guarding this and there's no way to make progress. And so you're just slowly gonna push, or gonna push g5, and you just have a very sound position, and I quite like this. So on that note, I think we should recap what we've seen in this video and then close it off. So in this video, we've seen 3 big mistakes. First, a5, played by Dariusz Swiercz against Fabiano Caruana, closing off the queen side like that ultimately cost him the game, in my opinion. And then we saw the other mistake by Sam Shankland against Wesley So, where he played king b8, king a8. Way too slow, in my opinion. Rook g8, followed by g5. He should have gone for his own attack. And then lastly, this move a4, fixing a weakness on b3, that was actually very important. I think that is really, really important. Just showcasing that the position could have been played completely differently, and that yeah, white had a very good position, and if he, you know, played slightly differently, if he just didn't include a4, I think he would have probably won the game. Now, if you guys did enjoy this, maybe I'll make a part 2 and recap, you know, these other rounds that are yet to come, because of course it's just very nice to gain new knowledge about these positions. So on that note, I think we should sign off, and if you like this video, I think you'll probably also like this analysis video of a game I recently played in the Philidor defense.